All right, so I got 5 o'clock, so we will call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Let the record show it is Monday, July the 27th. This is the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting. Madam Clerk, if I can get you to call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Gary Paytel,
Here.
Samuel Hall,
Here.
Jeffrey Jones,
Here.
Francis Pawlowski, here, and Art Graham.
Here. Okay, first thing is to approve the minutes of the virtual workshop that we had on June the 10th.
I haven't had a chance to look at them because I just got them by email, so I apologize for that.
I have a few comments.
Okay, Jeff?
Under C, the downtown delivery truck parking ordinance, I had trouble following what it said, so I have a bunch of changes in that paragraph. I don't know what the most efficient way to communicate them are, but
Jeff, if you just want to email them to me, we can put these minutes on the next meeting if that's appropriate.
yeah, nothing substantive really. It's just that
It's grammatics.
grammatics, yeah, and some of the points that we talked about.
It looks a little run on.
Other than that,
I
will email that to you tomorrow or tonight.
Okay.
If you'd
Anybody
like,
else have any comments?
like I could read what I edited.
Yeah, if you want to, and that way we can dispose of it tonight.
Okay.
I'm
Mr.
following.
Jones stated that the draft ordinance presented for the meeting, comma, which was modeled after the Key West ordinance, comma, was redlined to reflect changes that the agency agreed to previously. Dialogue ensued, including but not limited to enforcement procedures, unintended consequences, safety, proposed restricted areas, and then I struck public right of way because I'm not sure what that meant or how that fit in right there. And then continued on with the rest of the sentence as is.
Well, the comma for the that's just identifying that's where the restricted areas were. They were all within public
And
rights.
so I said proposed restricted areas.
Okay.
And I deleted the public right of way parenthetical.
Okay. We can track that.
Okay.
Is that it for edits for the June 10 minutes?
Does anybody else have any other comments or edits or corrections for the meeting held on June 10th? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
To the chair, I would like to offer motion that we accept the minutes from our July 10th meeting with the corrections, with the edits. Sorry.
Corrections and edits as stated by Mr. Jones.
Yes.
And I'll second that.
And there's a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? By your action, you've approved those minutes as corrected. Okay, the second meeting, minutes for regular Community Redevelopment Agency virtual meeting, June the 22nd. Any corrections, comments, or changes to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I so move that we
Is there a
accept the minutes.
I'll second.
It's been moved in second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 By your actions, you've approved those minutes. Okay, courtesy of Florida visitors will be down at the end of the agenda. Downtown Cape. Officer Evans.
Yes, sir. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Very good. We I think I told you on the last meeting, we do have our final officer that's assigned to the downtown Cape area. And everything's working really well. He actually just switched over today. So his official day will start, his official week will start this week. Other than that, we've just, some of the bars in the downtown area that were bars, now they have obtained licensing so they can start selling food. We confirmed that with ABT, and Sergeant Shark, along with myself and the chief, we met and talked about that. So it's kind of, we have a set of guidelines with the state, but we're having to kind of learn them as we go because they're constantly changing. And now these bars have now applied for and received some of the licensing so they can be open, even though they're very limited on food. So we're adapting to that. And other than that, we met with the city attorney earlier today to review the ordinance that we're going to be talking about tonight for the parking.
Mark, did we have any problems or concerns with the, there was a rally or something last weekend? Back to Blue?
No, we had a Back to Blue. Thank you for bringing that up. I apologize. I forgot that one of all of them. And it was actually very, we had a lot of people, more people. I know the news media, to our dismay, said there was dozens. Well, there was actually hundreds rather than dozens. We did meet with the promoters, and they did want to walk. They wanted to walk similar to what the BLM organizers did a couple of weeks prior, but this group wanted to walk kind of on the outskirts. So we accommodated them that day, and everything was peaceful. The only issues we had after the fact was we did have some anti-Back to Blue, Black Lives Matter folks that had some signage, and some anti or pro-abortions that they also brought signage. So they didn't get in an argument with the Back to Blue. They actually got into an argument with each of themselves. So the police were called. That was the only disruption we had, was the other two anti-protesting groups got into an argument.
Okay. Board members, anybody have any comments or questions or statements?
I do.
Yeah, Gary, and then Francis.
Just a quick question for my information. At one time, there was a study done in reference to the circles, the roundabouts at 2nd Street and 1st Street at Beach. Have we looked at that as to how they operate and whether or not they're operating appropriately and efficiently the way they should? Because one's a flow through kind of roundabout, and the other one is a stop sign, but yet is a roundabout. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
There was an engineering study done on both of the functionality of both roundabouts. The issue with the 1st Street roundabout having to be a stop intersection was due to geometry, and there would need to be additional right-of-way purchased in order to pull the pedestrian crossways further out of that in order to eliminate the stop signs. Went through an initial canvassing of the adjacent property owners to see if they'd participate via donating additional right-of-way. And then it was determined that the northeast corner, there's a very, very big and significant electrical vault there that would preclude expansion into that area. So that's as far as we went on the 1st Street roundabout with the island in place. The observation for the 2nd Street roundabout was to see if we could accommodate some type of island feature, because it came up in the Dix Heights presentation and original study about the art master plan. However, the engineers, I believe it was GAI, I could be wrong, but I believe it was GAI, did turning movement modelings, and I've also observed it personally. Longer fixed axle trucks and longer semi trucks cannot make it through that intersection with any type of raised center feature. So that intersection with the approaches the way they are now can function as a through roundabout with no stop signs, but we don't have the opportunity to add any type of vertical element in the center. So right now, they still operate as separate. The whole idea was to try to make them either both stop or both flow through. And because of the right-of-way geometry of both intersections, they were treated differently. That's something that kind of happened before I came on board.
I see. Okay,
That's
thank
the
you.
extent to which we've looked at it.
Is that me now? So Gary, I'm just gonna also just add to that. It has been a blemish on the plan, and it has been brought up in the CRA in multiple times before Bill Mann. It was designed by a young lady, and Lindorf approved it, and then we had to make some changes to the turn lane from that area onto A1A. So it has been brought up multiple times, and I agree with you. It's frustrating, and I think it's a blemish on the planning, but I digress on that. So I just had a question though, for the bars to restaurants. How are we going to address the zoning rules, the opening rules? Because we've been fighting the whole, you can't only stay open for so long because you're a bar, or you can only have, I mean, how are we going to address that?
We already have. Basically, once we found out last week, we saw through some social media that one of the bars was starting to serve some chips and some pizza rolls, and their famous amazing hot pockets is what they were going to be doing. So we immediately started looking into it. Sergeant Sharp, myself, and I talked with the attorney Chris Ambrosio as well. Anyway, we started pulling up some documents, went straight to the website, and we saw where they had actually applied and were granted the permission for the conditional food service that day. So they must have just gotten their approval when they started putting all this out on social media. Sergeant Sharp and his guys and gals went down there and made contact. We talked to them, and we basically monitored it. We also sent that information out to our patrol officers that were also in the area, in search of any possible violations. And I'll turn it over to Sergeant Sharp as far as, it looks like it went pretty well. We had a couple of businesses this past weekend that did some things, and we did report them to DPBR, but it wasn't in the area.
Yeah, the only restaurant and bar that's not open right now is Lynch's. As far as monitoring it, that's all we're doing. The 12 o'clock thing is still in effect. It's basically cease alcohol sales, no matter what kind of business you really are, whether a bar or a restaurant at midnight. So at that point, those bars, they're not going to make any money on a Hot Pocket or any kind of Totino's pizza rolls to stay open. So basically, everyone has had a closure by 12 o'clock. There's no alcohol out there. Everything's pretty much done and empty. And most said it's, if you've been down there that late at night recently, it's a ghost town about 12:30.
Okay, so then just to reiterate, so we're not cracking down on outdoor seating right now because there's only a few. We're not really worried about this food for bars because it's pretty much a ghost town now. But what are we going to do? Whoever gave them this permit or this ability to do so, is it limit what they can sell so that doesn't become a problem later on when COVID isn't affecting our sales?
So their permit is that they received from the state, from DBPR, is strictly just a restaurant license.
It's a what?
Is a restaurant license. Basically gives them the capability of selling food. It doesn't stipulate what kind of food they have or anything like that. That license is strictly saying, hey, you guys can sell food. And basically the marching orders now from ABT, who monitors all of DBPR issues, is that they want to make sure that they have a restaurant license and an alcohol license. And as long as they're adhering to social distancing and the 50% capacity levels for the inside, that's what they're looking at right now. That's the only thing they're monitoring and actually going to effect and taking some kind of enforcement action.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jeff?
Yeah, just a follow up. So they're not subject anymore to the 50% of total sales have to be food sales?
As of right now, based on my last conversation with a supervisor, ABT, their marching orders is strictly to make sure that you have a restaurant license and to make sure they're adhering to the basically 50% capacity and the social distancing.
Okay.
And with those violations, we're doing the same as what we were. Sergeant Sharp, one of the supervisors, if we see something that is an issue, other than something, say, for with our seating where the fire marshal will get involved. As far as for social distancing, all we do is we do the online reporting system through DPBR.
Is that it? Does that answer your questions, Jeff?
Yes.
Our city manager, Mike, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're monitoring that situation. While the DBPR has verbally told us that this is what they're doing going forward, it is in conflict with the governor's written, which has been issued and is applied to everyone. So we've got our city attorney taking a look at it to see if we can find in other jurisdictions where they've been given any written guidance from the DBPR or from ABT that we can rely upon. I would also note that earlier today, the governor's office said that he will be meeting with bar owners from across the state this week to see if there's a determination of some other way, shape, or form that he can allow bars to proceed to opening. And I guess the right way to say it is without some of these workarounds that are being put in place. But clearly they've placed an onus on us that makes it very difficult to enforce when the state tells us that they're allowing them to buy these licenses to open their doors and that they are not going to be the ones to audit 51% food sales.
I have a question for either Mark or Mike. Who's responsible to make sure that they're socially distanced 6 feet apart?
What we do is, well, if our officers, if we see it, we've done a couple of things. We've talked to the management, but we also do the self-reporting. If someone calls into our agency and their complaint basically is social distancing, excuse me, unless it is just outrageously visible that anyone would actually see what we've done in the past, same with Surf of the Bar, we took photographs, we talked with the management, and we stopped it immediately. However, a lot of the ones that are coming in, Mr. Chair, they're really, when you look at them, it depends on what angle you're looking at, how many people are actually in there, how many seats they have, are they all actually sitting as they should be sitting. So on those type cases, we do the online reporting. And basically, we fill out the form and submit that form through their website. And that's what they want us to do. But like I said, the ones that were very blatant, we went ahead and I got with Sergeant Sharp, and we actually went down there and talked to him, took photographs, and documented it.
So the primary focus is to make sure you want compliance. You don't want to get in there and shut them down.
Correct. We want to work with them. We understand we're all going through a difficult time. So, and we've all heard that for the past 4 or 5 months, all of us, including us and you guys. That's why we're doing this on Zoom right now. But when we have blatant violations with just reckless display, of ignorance to the law and trying to skirt around it, we're going to cease that at that time, and we're going to make sure we address that with that individual, whoever's the management at that time. But for the majority of the ones that we get and the complaints that people do call in when we go, unless it's blatant, then what we're doing is we're doing the automatic reporting, the online reporting.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of Downtown Cape before we move on to the city manager? Francis, since there's no picture of you, I'll just look to see when you're unmuted to know when you want to talk.
I don't
That's
know
all
why
right?
there's no picture of me. I'm on video. I don't understand.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, so that's the only way I know that you want to speak is when you become unmuted.
Okay, that works.
All right. Okay, Mike, Mr. Mann, I guess. First item is Veteran Memorial relocation. Can't hear you, Bill. Can't hear you.
Got to look up every once in a while. At one of our prior meetings, I was asked to get the city manager to participate in tonight's meeting to give the chronology of how the relocation of the Veterans Memorial came up. And at the same time, Francis, I believe several weeks ago, sent me some information about her ideas. Francis, you're on the video now. With some ideas that she had for that particular, for a concept maybe that could be used in the South End for that. But And I'll let Francis address those at the end, but first we'll turn it over to Mike and let him give you the chronology of how this relocation came about.
Thank you, Bill.
Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thank you for having me tonight. Bill, I'm not sure what information was sent to the CRA in advance of the meeting. Maybe if you could walk through what they've got. Can't hear you.
They simply have you as an agenda item, and I asked Chandra to post or have access to those 2 PowerPoints. There was no descriptive introduction into your discussion, though.
Okay, I will go all the way back then to the start, which is one of the things that the city council wanted to be able to do was have council briefings where they have the ability to discuss what topics they want to discuss, as opposed to always hearing what the city manager feels is important to them. We had one of those such meetings on February 17th, and a topic that was brought up by city council was the issue of the current location of the Veterans Memorial. Councilmember Doherty in particular said that he did not think the current location was an appropriate location for the Veterans Memorial. Many other council members concurred with him, especially those that had been in attendance during the dedication for the SS Gulf America, where there were enough people that they were actually standing in the street at the intersection in our downtown for that particular celebratory moment. So with that being said, council said they wanted us to go back and evaluate locations throughout the city that we felt might be appropriate to accommodate the Veterans Memorial going forward into the future. So with that being said, we tasked the Parks Director, Jason Fatides, with identifying some of those locations in the city. Back in March of this year, we brought an item back to council for their consideration, and there were 5 locations that were identified for the council's thought. The first was Oceanfront Park, the second was the golf course, the third was Huguenot Park, the fourth was Gonzalez Park, and the fifth was Rotary Park. And each of these particular locations had pros and cons that were associated with them. The other thing that council had asked us to do was to reach out to both the VFW and the American Legion to see if they had any preference for where a Veterans Memorial should be located. Both VFW and American Legion were in unison that they felt it should be located at Oceanfront Park, specifically because of its serene environment, adjacency to the water, and the ability to do something as a sunrise memorial at some point in the future if they ever needed to do so. So in March, City Council asked us to narrow down the choices to 2 particular locations. A new one was introduced, and that was the Beaches Museum property, where there were 2 possible locations, one in the center court area and other on the western edge in the V-shaped notch that goes right along the edge of Beach Boulevard. So in June, we brought the item back to council to explore those 3 options, Oceanfront Park and the 2 locations at Beaches Museum. And after a spirited discussion, council ultimately decided, I believe by a vote of either 5-0 or 6-0, voted that they wanted to see the memorial moved to Oceanfront Park. And that's the chronology and the methodology of how we got to where we are today. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Francis.
Thank you for letting me have a moment to talk about this. So this is where my questions and frustration are from. So you said in February it was brought up. I had spoken to a couple council members at the time about some options. I'm not going to say they got the idea from me because I don't know if they did or not. I just know I had spoken to some people. We actually had a meeting scheduled. The CRA had a scheduled meeting in February, and we talked about coming up and having workshops in regards to certain items in the downtown area as well as the South Beach area, at which one of those options was what to do with our property. And one of the proposals I had prepared in February was for us to introduce the idea of creating a memorial park off of that area where Jacksonville Drive and South Drive was at, and utilizing the CRA parking lot for supporting that big lot that the city owns itself. So my question really is more along the lines of, if there was something that was in, they wanted to address something that was in the downtown district, which is under the CRA, why was the CRA not included in this process? And why did it only go to the Parks and Recs? So you could only look at current Parks and Recs versus alternative options we could have provided. I feel like it's something that was in this downtown area and is ending up in the downtown area, and the CRA has had no interaction at all with it before voting.
I can't answer why it wasn't brought to the CRA, other than the city council threw out other suggested locations as well in that March meeting. I think it was March. And that's where they wanted us to consider Beaches Museum as well.
So it's my understanding that the CRA has the mandate and the majority steps in working in those two areas, and that we should have been counseled on this as well to see if it fits the plan for downtown or in the areas that are in our area. And we then could have, had we gotten to the workshop before COVID, provided alternative options, because I still think I would still like to talk about that being an option down off Jack's Drive and down whatever that section is. It's like South Beach Drive and Jacksonville Drive, because those properties are owned by the city. We as a council haven't had a discussion point on it yet, and I know that we have to have that discussion. I can't speak for the group, but I still feel like the process, if we are really trying to make the CRA work like the CRA is supposed to work, where we are employees in essence of the council, I think a lot of that work, since it was in our areas and our purview, we should have been involved in the process, and it might be something that we need to address for future projects.
And I think it's certainly within the CRA's purview. If you all wanted to send a communication to the council expressing an opinion one way or the other, it's certainly within your purview to do so.
But prior to doing that, the CRA as a group needs to vet that, and as a unified recommendation come up, yeah, we would like that to be considered as a recommendation. And to Francis's point, the CRA has not had that internal discussion yet. And that is one of the fairly soon upcoming workshops that we're going to have, is to discuss the disposition of the vacant CRA and city-owned parcels in the south end. So go ahead.
I agree with that 100%, but I'm not trying to slap a hand or anything like that. But what I'm getting at is that vote on where that should have gone should never have gone to vote without the CRA involved at all. Anything that's in the downtown area and that area that we're in charge of should have come through the CRA if we're working the way that we should have. We shouldn't have been bypassed at all. And I just don't want any future things to be bypassed by the CRA just because council wants it, because that's not how it's supposed to work. And that's what I'm getting at, is like that we had something on the agenda. We had planned to do meetings. We could have entertained that idea had it been brought to us, because it is something in our area that we're in charge of making sure fits. And I just want any future projects not to be bypassed by us again, because that's not how it's supposed to work.
Well, to the extent that the CRA was involved in the location of Oceanfront Park, they were involved because that was part of the downtown plan. In terms of the individual components of that park, I think the discussion would have been whether or not putting a memorial there compromised the function of that park, which it doesn't. I reached out after Jason Fatiti's, the golf course guy, Trevor, actually laid it out in a chalk line where the proposed location was going. And the first thing I told him was to consult with the landscape architect who designed the park to make sure it was not compromising his design. And I know the gentleman fairly well. I've worked with him in the past. And coincidentally, he also did the design for the existing memorial. So in terms of the aesthetics of the park, the intent of the park, the flow of the park, it was adequately vetted by the designer of both the park and the Veterans Memorial.
I understand that, but can you not tell me that had it gone through the proper channels and at least us been involved in the process, because it's in our district and it's in our purview, could you not tell me that us hearing about it would not have prompted us to push that agenda sooner before it got voted on by council?
I don't know, because I don't know what the balance of the membership feels about it. I understand your question, though.
I'm just saying that there were alternative options that are not park related that we could have presented, and we're actually in line to do so. So like I said, I'm a broken record at this point. I'll digress, but I understand, but I was talking to people. I was hoping to do it as a group. I would love for us as a group to maybe discuss if we do want to address it in any way. Clearly at this point, we've already involved the people who would like it, the veterans who would like it where it's at, but they were never given alternative options. And I did see in your thing you sent us that some of those ideas, were on that for everyone to see, but I digress, and I thank you for your time.
All right. Any other comments or concerns or questions? Jeff Jones.
Yes. Well, whether or not we get involved in that particular aspect on the location, if it is moved, then we have the vacant corner that we'll have to deal with. And to Francis's point, that probably should be insured to be a CRA initiated effort.
And that it has been, sir. That is a part of the Dix Heights Master Plan. That's one of the locations for, I don't want to get the term wrong, focal art, but statemental art. It's that's a gateway visual area when you're coming in either mostly by vehicle, but that corner was picked out because there was some discussion when Dix Heights was doing the plan, because they picked up on it in the narrative that there is a proposal to relocate the Veterans Memorial. If that does happen, this should be a location for a statemental art sculpture or some type of vertical art element.
Are you talking about those lots that are along the road that the city owns, not the CRA owns?
No, we're talking about the existing location of the Veterans Memorial downtown.
Stop. Jeff has got the floor.
Okay. If the memorial is moved, then we have that corner to deal with. And I read something in the paper summarizing the meeting where there was some discussion, I don't know whether it came from city council or whatnot, of coordinating with sneakers as to the use of that corner.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that, I understand, Bill, that, yeah, that's part of a feature of the plan is to maybe do something different with that corner. But now it's coming up, and we should be involved in either the initiation or approval of what happens to that corner.
Mike, it sounds like there was an oversight, and I understand that, and I understand these things happen. Plus, we weren't able to have a couple of meetings when this whole COVID thing started off. But I'm take it from where Francis is coming from, and the point that Jeff's making now is we can make sure as we move forward in the future that we get involved in things that happen in the CRA areas.
I just wanted to clarify for everyone on the call, Jeff, you had mentioned the issue of sneakers. In a conversation with Greg Pratt, he just indicated that he would like to be aware of what was going into that spot before it actually went in. He wanted to make sure whatever was done was complementary to his commercial investment right next to it. And the answer was, yeah, we'll let you know what we're going to do before we actually do it.
Anybody else have any comments, questions, or concerns about the Veterans Memorial relocation? Mr. Mann.
The only last point, back to Jeff's question, it is identified in the Art Master Plan as a focal art location. That would be funded by the CRA. The selection process of how we're going to go about getting, if we do a request for or call for artists or whatnot, that will be decided by the CRA. So you will be heavily involved in what goes in that location, both through funding and through how we let it out to see what kind of sculpture or whatever we want to put in there. So that's the extent to which the CRA will be involved in that going forward. At the vacated memorial site, which is on the northeast corner of 2nd Street at Beach Boulevard.
Mr. Hall.
Well, yes, when that monument is moved, I know there are several parts to it. There are the pavements, and there are little monuments that recognize each branch of the service. Will it keep the same design, or will the configuration change? Any idea about how that's going to be done?
Yes, sir. In talking with the landscape architect, and speaking with Trevor with the Parks and Recreation Department, their intent is to keep it predominantly intact. The actual size of the radius may change slightly to get it in the new location, but it is proposed that there be a flagpole there, and they understand that if the flag flies at night, it's got to be illuminated. And the memorial will still be set up in a circular pattern, much as it is right now.
Okay, nice.
Francis?
I just want to make sure, I know the flag has to be illuminated, but it has been addressed as far as if it's going to be an amber light because of it being right on the ocean and the neighbors right next to the park.
I specifically asked the Parks and Recreation Department to canvass the neighbors because there is a condominium immediately adjacent to the north, number
Yep.
one. Number two, it may be that seasonally we have to change out to an amber bulb, or maybe we spotlight it with an amber bulb from day one, but those are two different options. Or we
But
don't, don't fly. Pardon?
it has been discussed.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's the first thing I gave him when I met him on site and found out what the lay of the land was.
Right.
And you also got to deal with sea turtles. Gary, do you have a question?
I do, and then I have a comment. I assume that we're going to get some kind of budget for this or estimate for cost that we'll be able to review at some point down the road here.
I have not had that discussion with Parks and Recreation. The city manager may know, but they may be considering that that's that they're doing it within their budget. They haven't asked for CRA assistance yet. If they do ask for CRA assistance, it will be fully vetted by the board before we would fund it. So I'm just not sure.
Okay, so the possibility is that it would not be CRA funds.
Yes, sir, potentially. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but there is that possibility.
Okay. And just my comment from a little larger perspective, kind of going back to Francis's comment, I know that the city is spending a significant amount of time right now trying to do visioning for the city, but that also includes the downtown district. And I'm just wondering how the CRA will be involved in that process and trying to develop a cohesive vision for particularly the downtown area, and how we can work together to make sure that what's implemented is what the city wants and also consistent with what the CRA is doing. Actually,
that leads me to a good segue. I was going to discuss it later on in the agenda, but I can do it right now. I had a phone call with Jacob Schumer with Cliff Shepard's firm that's doing our downtown plan consolidation. You remember when we put them under contract, they said I think 6 to 8 week contract time frame, and we're getting up around week 7 right now. We are preparing to present the consolidated plan work effort at a special meeting in August. And I haven't scheduled it yet because I wanted to get with y'all, but I'm thinking sometime the week of August the 10th. So that will come up. And after we digest what is remaining of the existing approved plan, that sets the stage for a vision, or, you know, an update to the downtown vision plan going forward. Because just like in the South End, we'll know what we have in place versus what we can do and what we're still committed to do with existing funding. So that's going to be, that will be born from this plan consolidation. The next step after that will be developed. Okay, what now going forward?
Okay.
Gary, you still have the floor.
I think that kind of answers my question. I just want to make sure that, you know, rather than us going in different directions, the city in one and the CRA in another, that we're coordinated and we're pursuing the same vision for the downtown area. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's go on to item B, which is the downtown CRA and the CIP proposed 2021 downtown CRA budget review.
Thanks, Mike.
Mr. Mann.
Yes, sir. We've got Ashley Gossett on board today, and also in your information package, I distributed a copy of the proposed 2021 budget for the CRA, as well as, or for the downtown, as well as the capital improvements plan for 21 through 25. And the reason I'm doing this was another specific request of the agency at a prior workshop, that they wanted some level of assurance, or that you collectively wanted some level of assurance that the downtown budget and CIP were not on the same track to spillage, as I call it, as the South End are. So ostensibly, that's what Ashley is here tonight for. But this also could in part be like the initiation of the training a component of the training session that would have been on July 31st, which we will still have, but this will just give you some insight as to how staff comes up with our capital improvements plan and our annual budgeting. And there's no better person to help make heads or tails of that than Ashley. So I'd turn that over to her at this point.
Ashley, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so let me address Bill's statements in order. So the first thing we want to talk about is how the downtown district is different from the south end, and it does not need to return funds to the city of Jacksonville. So to respond to that, the downtown district's capital improvement plan, it's fairly large, and we still have projects that are forming. The visioning plan, the estimates provided in that plan exceed like $4.5 million. So we haven't even inserted those into the capital improvement plan because Bill is still working on or working with the vendor to develop estimates to give to the CRA to prioritize on what you all choose to action. So the difference between the two agencies is the downtown district still has, several large infrastructure projects to work through that it will be doing so for, the next 5 to 10 year range. The CIP plan that Bill distributed to you all is a listing of the projects within the next 5 years. And in the downtown plan, primarily we're working on that area between, basically Beach Boulevard down to 13th Avenue. We've completed project 1. Project 2 is underway. Project 2 is an $11 million project. And then after that, we move on to projects 3, 4, and 5. And so those are scheduled out in the CIP until 2024 at a total cost of, almost $13 million. The other projects that the CRA is considering, as you're all aware, are the dune walkovers and beach outfalls. And so we have $2.5 million currently budgeted for the dune walkovers and about $600,000 budgeted for the beach outfalls over the next 5 years. This is in addition to, the estimated $4.5 million we have earmarked for whatever projects that might come out of the visioning plan. So the downtown CRA has a lot of projects that it still wants to work through. The projects identified in the plan and prioritized by the agencies over the year, they have been programmed by the Public Works Department in coordination with Bill in terms of timelines and priority order and kind of logical order of operations. Does that give you some guidance? Do you have any questions?
Mr.
Actually,
Hall.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say the projects.
Dan, you had a question?
Yes, I was unmuted. Yes, you were talking about the walkovers. It seems like there are like 49 walkovers in Jax Beach and 28 in the CRA area. Do we have additional walkovers in the budget, or is that for maintenance of the ones that we currently have? What is the status?
So the number I quoted, the $2.5 million, that's moving forward with the non-ADA walkovers within the CRA district.
That would be 25 of them. That would be all of the remaining non-ADA walkovers between 13th Avenue South and 9th Avenue North.
Okay, thanks.
And, yes, sir.
Bill, are you going to add something?
No, I was just going to say that all the projects that Ashley was alluding to are on page 4 of the capital improvements plan, and you can see them. It graphically shows the fiscal outlay that we have, and this has been the whole downtown infrastructure project's been going on since the action plan. That was a major spinoff from the adoption of the downtown action plan amendment to the plan. So it's not that these projects are just coming up. This has been a long-term planned process. Each year we drop off the year that's been completed. We add the next year that's coming up.
Francis?
I think I'm unmuted now. So I understand all the infrastructure projects have been going on ever since I've been on the board. I understand why they're important. My biggest concern is to make sure that we as a CRA have enough wiggle room, per se, to have projects mid-year without having to go to council, which has been one of our biggest thorns. And maybe since I see that Chris is on the phone, he can maybe get a little bit more elaboration on this. So in the downtown area, when the budget is being created for capital improvements and other projects that may come up, how are you guys coming up with the percentage that's in there for us to use without having to go to city council to get a budget amendment? Does that make sense? Does my question make sense? Ashley. Yeah, I'm just curious as to, so it's my understanding, so Chris, it's my understanding that the CRA, as long as it follows the procedures of the city council, we should be, and we have the money, we can follow their processes and use the money that's been budgeted for the year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so then my question, Ashley, is how do we make sure that our budget is robust enough that we can get projects done without having to involve city council, and how are we processing that?
So I think we have a challenge with that, with the way the state statutes have been amended in the last year regarding capital improvement projects in CRA districts. In the past, we would not budget them until we were essentially ready to award them. So we had a final number on them. And so at the time, you know, when the project was bidded and awarded, at that time, we would do a resolution to amend the budget. The CRA agency would approve that, and then we would take it on to the council to approve as it's part of the global city budget. So the statutes that have changed has said that we now have to budget CIP projects in the original budget. So when you guys approve the budget this year, you'll see for the first time in several years, like several $1 million are being appropriated in the 2021 budget for the projects. As part of that, we need to be very clear with our engineer estimates, because the statute speaks to if you under budget your project and there's not really any scope change, you need to wait a budget cycle to true up those numbers. So the numbers that you're seeing, you know, in terms of wiggle room with the engineering estimates, we try and be very conservative so that, you know, the full scope of the project, we're contemplating all the costs for it. Additionally, you know, we have this 5-year plan, but if the agency prioritizes one project over the other, what we can do in finance is, you know, we can shift a project that was originally scheduled in year 2 back to year 5 as the agency decides that another project, you know, has priority now. So we have that flexibility to serve the agency.
So it's it doesn't really answer my question. Maybe I'm just not understanding the response, and that could be on me, but, and maybe Mike may want to even comment on this, but I'm not trying to say how the city should work, and I'm not at all qualified to do the regulation financing that you're doing, but it's my concern that we don't continue the way we were back in the day, because we should not have to go to city council for any projects that come up per se that fit our plan design or what we're entitled to do, as long as we follow those processes. So I guess I need to re-ask my question, which is, it's not a percentage per an actual assignment. Is there like a bucket on the side that we can title, you know, unforeseen projects coming up? Is there something like that, or does it actually have to have, you know, we want to do X, Y, Z, we can overestimate how much those are, so we don't have that problem with underestimating and waiting a cycle? Is there stuff like that that we can do to put on the budget? And then if so, if we don't do that project, can it be reassigned the next year to something else?
Let me preface Ashley's response with one thing. The big credo we got through our FRA training was, you can do it if it's in the plan. But just because it's in the plan doesn't mean you have to do it. Right now, the downtown plan is set on projects that we know we're going to do. We don't have any wish list projects necessarily that are identified in the plan, unless when we have our meeting with, all these firm names, Shepherd, with Cliff Shepherd's firm. If we find out there is some other dynamic projects that, guess what? We oversaw them, we didn't see them, they're still in the plan. At that point, the CRA would have the option of saying, hey, we recommend maybe taking a year back from the infrastructure project, diverting some of those funds to this project that's already in the plan that we'd like to prioritize over that. I don't think we're going to find a big list of those projects. So the first task, and I don't mean to be repetitive, again, is after we get our hands wrapped around this consolidated downtown plan for what it is, just like we're going to do in the South End, we need to identify amendments to achieve those type of projects that you wish were in the plan but aren't in there now. And then annually, it becomes a review of whether or not you want to divert the existing funding stream for the downtown projects to some of these newer projects, but they're not in the plan yet.
Well, from based off that, then that would mean that if we had money assigned to a project and we want to divert one project that's on the budget to something else that popped up, we still have to go to city council to get approval to move that. Is that not correct?
It's just a matter of timing. We had been doing it in the past incrementally as the projects were identified. And as I told you this year, statutorily, we now have to do the estimates in advance. But yeah, it's still the budget will still be approved by city council.
So, there's, all right. So I feel at this point that no one's able to provide me an answer that will let us work, like Chris has confirmed multiple times, that we should have enough in our annual budget that will let us maneuver funds to deal with issues in the CRA without involving the council, as long as it's in our purview. Like, I feel no one's giving me an answer to that.
I'll make sure that's a point when we bring in, we may ask Cliff Shepard if they'd be involved in doing some training with us, but there's a philosophical difference here. And I understand that you don't get that part of it. I'll make sure that's definitely part of the formal training that we get. And it's not going to be July 30th now, but in the near future. I understand that because we come up with the same difference of opinion. And I understand that you don't think that because the statute says we follow the purchasing procedures of the city, to me, that means literally we follow the purchasing procedures of the city. And that's how I've been trained. And that's how I came on board to do this.
But it's been, it has been confirmed by two different attorneys now that as long as we have the money and we follow their process, we don't have to go to city council as long as it's in the purview. And just at this point, we don't have the funding. And I was hoping that Ashley would be able to say, hey, yeah, you can just, we do have this money. We can overestimate these projects and then refunnel those over somehow with some accounting, whatever. I was hoping for something like that so that we can have a little bit more cushion. So like if something came up and we wanted to fund the memorial thing without going to the council, or if we had a structure, certain things that we could do mid-year, then having to plan out a whole year in advance and hope that we stick to it and really not ever have, it's just, that's what I was hoping for, but I guess I'm not going to get it.
Well, let's do this. Either Ashley or Chris, if you guys can walk us through what we approved at the special meeting earlier this month, the $40,000 for the camera system for the police. Why did we have to go get that approved by city council? Why couldn't we handle that on our own? That's one of the questions that came up, and that's how all this kind of got the heat under it. If you can just walk us through what happened with that project, that gives us some better insight of issues. A specific project.
I mean, I'll give it, Ashley, you can chime in from your perspective, but my position on all of this, and I've expressed this to Frances as well, and she stated, if there are items within the CRA authority, then, and I'm actually going to read straight from something that I've produced earlier for a response to this very issue, was that my opinion is, and the way that I interpret the Florida statutes, and I think this is the correct interpretation, is that this CRA body has been empowered with all of the rights and privileges to enter into contracts, provide and arrange for any contracting services, solicit requests for proposals, solicit services, pay for those services. And the only requirement is that if the CRA takes any of those steps, that's without city council involvement, the only requirement is that the CRA would just follow the same procedures that the city would follow in obtaining those same services or letting the contracts. So that's my position, and I don't, if there's a budget that's already available for the CRA, I'm not sure why it would have to go back to City Council, because the council, through its ordinance that created the CRA, it has vested all of those powers and authorities that are contained in Chapter 163 to this body. And I realize that it seems like this dispute's been going on for quite a while before my tenure here, but that's my position on this. And I think Francis alluded to, perhaps one of my predecessors agreed with that as well. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer why it went back.
Ashley, do you have a reason why we had to go back through City Council this last time?
Well, I can tell you what's my understanding, and Chris can tell me if I've got the legal understanding incorrect. So to answer your question about this $40,000 camera purchase, it was not contemplated in the original budget at all. Our funds that we set aside in the budget, we have the operating budget. I can talk about that a little bit later. And then the capital budget is project specific. And that was not one of the projects contemplated in the original budget. But we do hold funds in reserve. And so if the agency, seeks to engage in something else, what you're talking about, wanting some flexibility as things come up. So that if the agency wants to pursue something, what we would do is bring a resolution in front of the agency to amend your budget to include this project. And then because it was not contemplated in the original budget, the city's position is that the agencies are a component of the city's entire budget. So we would follow that same process and amend the budget with the city council. And then also, because there is no independent purchasing policy for the agency, it would follow the city's purchasing policy, which states that purchases over $25,000 that are not budgeted and are not otherwise competitively awarded need to be approved by the council. So that's my understanding of how this $40,000 purchase moves from the agency through the council.
Did I answer your question, Francis, before I go to Gary?
So why can we not have more funds in reserve for emotions like this, for things like this throughout the year?
I guess from an accounting point of view, we wouldn't want to just budget something that we're not sure will come to pass. In the process of bringing it in front of the agency and having the agency decide on it, you're already going to be discussing it in a meeting. So making the motion in the meeting and adjusting the budget is a kind of very transparent and straightforward accounting for something like that. So I think you do.
I would like to make a motion for us to find a way to increase our reserve, because there's no way you can empower an agency that has no power, and there's no way you can empower an agency with no money to move forward with any projects that are even small without having to incorporate, multiple places. It's going to, I would like to make a motion to do that. And if there's any way to increase that or any parameters that you'd want, I'd like to hear them, because we have our hands tied and we can't do anything. We should have been able to approve a $40,000 camera upgrade without having to go to City Council. We just should have been able to do that.
Gary?
Ashley, are we just talking about the capital projects right now? We keep saying budget, but I get the impression that this whole conversation is centered around capital projects, not the true downtown budget. Is that correct?
I guess I look at them as one budget. Your budget is comprised of your personal services, your operating, and your capital. And capital needs to be budgeted by project as the guidance in the state statutes for redevelopment agencies. And so I think we're focusing on capital because those are the projects that are a little bit fluid, where the priority order might change with those. Within your operating budget, we have money set aside for repairs and maintenance. If like one camera, needs to be repaired, you got the latitude is there to go make that repair. But with the capital, we need to be budgeting capital by specific project. And so if we don't have that project in the original budget, we can bring it forward. The agency can formally adopt it with a resolution, and we can amend the budget that way.
The thing I guess I'm trying to get my arms around is when I go back to the CRA resolution for last year, which adopted the operating budget for fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019. There's always an ending balance. And right now at the end of 2020, there's supposed to be an ending balance of $26 million, almost $27 million. How does that tie into the other budgeting sheets that we see on page 1 or page 4? I'm not sure how we tie all of that together, because if we've got $26 million in the downtown district, somehow those dollars need to get spent. And I'm not seeing how we're spending all of the money that right now is in the budget. We're projecting out over the next 5 years how we're going to do it. And I have a number of questions about, what's being budgeted, and, there seem to be a number of items that aren't included in the expenses area that should be there, such as pressure washing and, doing a lot of the Dick's height work, whether it's the lighting, the signage, and things to that extent. To me, it doesn't seem like we've got all of the items identified in the budget that really need to be there. In fact, when you go to page 1 of the sheets that we were given, you go to phase 3C, 3D, redevelopment funding, you've got 4.1 million in 2024, and then the total is 12.2 million. But when you go to the fiscal plan, that's on page 4, for fiscal year 2024, it's only 4 million, it's not 4.1. And the total obviously is different too. So, and I guess I'm trying to also understand where is all of the sources of funding, because, for 2021, we're only showing $785,000 in the sources of funding. Why wouldn't that be more like, the 6 million that the district typically gets? And, what is 3 million of a half-cent infrastructure surtax bond proceeds? I don't, somehow I don't understand what that is and how it suddenly gets applied in 2024. So I'm not sure what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing here. And I really feel that in order to really get a budget together for the downtown district, we really need to sit down and have some conversation with all of the board members and to really understand line item by line item what's going into the budget and what's not. And do we have sufficient reserves to cover ourselves in case we have some overages somewhere? I heard you make a comment about, I think, $4 million in some kind of additional funding that you budgeted for, but I'm not sure what that is. So to me, I just got a lot of parts and pieces here, but I don't have a complete picture that gives me a comfort level. Someone who has fiduciary responsibility on it, in reference to the CRA, I can't get comfortable with all of this.
So I think I'll try and answer your questions in reverse order. So your question about the first page of the CIP plan, it says $4.1 million. Oh, yay, thank you. All right, so on page 1 of the CIP plan, your question about funding sources, and it says $4.1 million in 2021, and then $6.8 million in 2022. This document is our CIP plan, our capital improvement plan for the 5-year window. and it is isolated to just those projects. And so it is matching the funding source to the project expense. So this is not the total revenues received by either agency. These are the revenues from the agencies that will be used for these specific projects. So this is a component of the total budget. So the total budget for the downtown CRA, you know, you're asking the question of where are those funds going? You know, you're right that we receive about $5 million, or actually where we are now. We are expecting to receive $6.8 million in revenues for the downtown agency. To your earlier question where you say there's $26 million in ending balance, that's a fund balance in a moment of time. So at the end of every fiscal year, we do a year-end appropriation, and the agency is asked to approve that. And what we're doing is the fund balance at the end of a year, we're assigning those dollars to specific projects. And those projects might not take place in the next year. They might be taking place 2 or 3 years out. So your other question is, do we have adequate reserves for our projects? You know, I'll answer yes. We are monitoring, you know, the plan, the agency's plans, the projects associated with those plans, and the estimated revenues each year for the tax increments funds. Some years we might spend more than the annual revenues if we have an especially large project. And some years we might put money into reserve as we're saving up and planning for that next large project. I'm sure I missed some of the questions that you asked, but does that help to clarify anything?
I mean, it helps a little bit, but if we've got $26 million at the end of the 2020 fiscal year, and we're showing how we're spending $35 million in the way of funding sources over the next 5 years, it means that we still have $26 million remaining in our budget in some way.
So that was one of the challenges with budgeting the CRAs, because in the past, we did not budget the projects until they were awarded. We would kind of earmark those funds in the cash flows, but the document that you're looking at, the original budget from last year, that doesn't show any capital expenditures for the year. So that's why the $26 million, you know, looks like such a large number, but really I think we're on track to finish this year around like $13–14 million in fund balance. And that's because of the projects that were awarded and expenditures made, primarily project 2.
Well, I think it would be good to somehow get some kind of document that helps us understand what's been expended this year, that takes that fund balance down so that we understand exactly what we've got and then how that projects out over the years. And I think we ought to go ahead and project out through 2047, because the CRA is in existence now until 2047. I know we don't have projects for all those years, but let's start taking a look at it, because if we don't find projects to fund, the monies are going to go back to the city of Jacksonville again, as they're happening in the South Beach District. And we as the CRA need to be planning and looking ahead as to what future projects we need to be doing in order to make sure we're appropriately putting those funds to use rather than giving them back to the city of Jacksonville.
So I will say that when we return the funds from the TIF district, they go back to the taxing authorities, and the city of Jacksonville Beach is one of those authorities. So anytime we're returning funds, the city of Jacksonville Beach is also a beneficiary of those funds.
Yeah, but we lose 2/3 of those funds. And we might as well put those funds to use, because, you know, to a certain extent, we're doing work within those 2 districts to improve the infrastructure and other aspects, and monies that the city would otherwise have to come up with to improve in those areas. So to a certain extent, the city is deriving a greater benefit when they're not giving the funds back again. And I think we really need to sit down and have a hard look at these budgets, because there's plenty of work that needs to be done in the downtown area. And I don't see all of that being incorporated into the numbers that I've been given to date.
Chandra, can I get you to put everybody back on the screen again? There we go. Well, Gary, to let you know, we're still going to plan the CRA training, and hopefully we'll get that done in the next couple of weeks, definitely sometime in August. And Gilmore and Taylor are going to talk about that later on in this same meeting. Jeff Jones, you had your hand up.
But before I leave, I guess what I'm still trying to understand, and this was the question I had at our last meeting, what is the budgeting process that we're going to be using to get a budget approved for the CRA prior to it going to the city for approval? Because it's part of the city budget, and the city is getting ready at the end of this week to start having its budgeting meetings, and we haven't even gotten a budget in front of us, a complete budget that can help us understand what's going to be going on for the next year for us. And somehow we've got the tail wagging the dog here, in my opinion, and we need to figure out what we're going to need to do so that we have our ducks in a row, so that the city can then move forward and do its final budgeting process. And so what is the schedule for this? When are we going to sit down and do this?
Ashley, Chris, Mike, Bill?
Bill, you're on mute.
You're muted, Bill.
I remember to look up. Sorry, I'm trying to keep notes. Actually, we're in the middle of the budget process right now. What I handed you on the blue bar sheets is our estimate of the proposed budget for next year. Is it not, Ashley? I believe.
It is.
It is.
I'm sorry, what's the blue bar sheet? I don't know what you're referring to.
It's a 2-page sheet. Should have been right after the capital improvement plan.
Well, and again,
Page
that's
17
only
and 18.
the downtown district.
Right.
It doesn't include anything as a, yeah, it doesn't include anything that relates to the capital improvement projects. That's just a basic expenditure spreadsheet. Again, I feel like we're getting bits and pieces, and we don't have a complete budget here.
I would like to add that I'd also think that, to Gary's point, we should be able to add things to this list prior to it being approved for the year, so we're not held without having what we would like directed as well.
Yeah.
But for capital projects, you've got that ability. For instance, I don't remember who said it a little while ago, like, where's the money for the pressure washing? And the other thing you didn't mention was the palm tree trimming. It's in the maintenance for the downtown district. If you look, I can't remember what line item it is. I can't read this.
So the
It's
tree trimming.
line item 45 on page 2 of 3 of the blue bar sheet. Is that the accurate line item for the downtown? I thought it was over $150,000.
So the tree trimming and the pressure washing, graffiti abatement are in 2 different line items.
Oh, okay. I'm
Tree
sorry.
trimming is a contract services, and we have $126,000 budgeted for various contract services, but largely the tree trimming, the elevated level of maintenance of trimming the trees in a second time throughout the year.
Right.
And the city pays for the original or the initial trimming. And then the paver cleaning and graffiti abatement, that's in the 46 repairs and maintenance account, about halfway down the page, $301,500. And that is largely the elevated maintenance program for the downtown area.
And we've also got all of our consultant fees included in these numbers, the new consultant fees that we're going to be paying. I'm not sure if they're coming out of this year's budget or next year's budget.
Well, the consultants we're paying right now are out of this year's budget. We do have as a line item next year under item 32, professional services. We put in $30,000. that's the type of thing. If you in your own mind know right now, hey, we want to get whether it's Shepherd's firm or another firm to pick up on where they came up with a plan consolidation and give us some ideas how to go forward, that could perhaps be increased some. That's, if you want to have that discussion, we can do that as well. So that would be an item that gives you a little more discretion. Just say, hey, we want to increase our professional services budget so we can entertain getting outside consultants, because the CRA can pay to have studies performed. That's not something that the capital improvements are where we really need to tie it down to we have known projects. But the consulting work, that's something that we could look at. If you don't think $30,000 is adequate, we need to come up with, well, what would the people be doing downtown? But right now, to the earlier question, existing contracts are on this year's budget, not next year's budget.
Well, I think it would be worthwhile having a workshop session that really gives us a clear picture of the budget and where the numbers are.
We can do that. This was not intended to be that meeting. I was just using this as an opportunity because I wanted to give you the data so Ashley could let you know that we're not having the problem with spillage downtown, or we don't have it in our minds. And that was the main point. But while we had it, it was just a good way to let you know where we are in the budget process and how we do the budgets every year. The budget, the demand for the budget typically comes up from the line item departments. Public Works, because they do the major infrastructure, Parks and they do the maintenance of the rights of way, and Parks and Recreation because they maintain all of the hardscape and all the parks improvements. So we get from them what their capital improvements plans are for each year, for each 5-year period.
And I would say that, you know, it's not just a discussion about the downtown district, but it's also the South Beach district.
Right.
And I know that you're working on trying to pull some costs together on the capital projects that we know are still outstanding down there. And I've not seen the list from Public Works that shows me exactly what they're seeing as, you know, outstanding works down there. But I'd really like to see that and understand where we are, including the items that you and I had talked about some time ago.
Right. And I have the projects. We have the cost identifier for the projects. I just had a meeting with Marty last week about that. I'm waiting for estimates from the city Public Works city engineer to give an engineer's estimate as to the design and construction of the multi-purpose trail path. When we get those numbers in, the next step will be to formulate either a plan amendment for the south end or a series of plan amendments to get them into the plan. And then we'll have the funding, we'll have the cost estimate, and we'll put them in whatever the appropriate year CIP is when we get to that point. It may be next year's budget. So we're there. Again, the point of this today was just to let you know, as requested, why this downtown is not in the same predicament, if you want to call it that the south end is. And we have the comfort level that we're not. Obviously, you need some more detail for that. That is more what I envision the training overall for the CRA for both districts, regardless. But I wanted to at least, you know, wet your whistle with it, because tonight we were talking, Ashley had the metrics and had the numbers put out here to show you why we're not in trouble this year downtown, or why we don't think we are going forward. So beyond that, it's really the detailed training where we'll see what the appropriate input is, what the appropriate time frame is, and what input you have over the overall active budget.
Okay. Well,
Andrew, can I get you to put the full screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. And just so you'll know, your participation and your influence in the budget is not radically different than the city council's approval and review of the budget for the whole city. It's the same thing. It's more of a line. If you see the line items at the end and you don't like it, that's the point. You say, hey, we don't like it. I mean, that's how our city council does it. This is not a different process that our city council does. It's just the CRA dealing with the CRA budget.
Well, and that's why I want to make sure we've got the opportunity to do it, because nothing has been scheduled, but yet we're moving into the next fiscal year. So
because the
just
operating
concerned.
departments have given us what their needs are, and it's by and large spending the money. And for the south end, we've gotten the money for the infrastructure projects. We will have that discussion in August. I mean, I'm sorry, again, there's only so much one person can do. So I'm trying to react to all these needs as quickly as I can, but it doesn't appear that it's quick enough. So.
Okay.
Jeff Jones.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me toss out a hypothetical that might be a workaround, or to see if it would be a workaround. You know, we have within the operating budget, the repair and maintenance account. We also have the tree trimming. We have professional services. And there's to cover a number of different things within each of those categories. when we look at the camera situation of last year, if we had set up, say, a safety enhancement account and budgeted 100,000 for it last year, and then the camera issue came up, could we have covered the camera issue out of the safety enhancement budget? Or have a beautification enhancement budget line item to cover things that improve the overall, appearance of the downtown district? Are those things we can do within the operating budget?
I think you could, to the point that it's not just totally speculative, because as Ashley is always cautions us on, it comes to a point where you put these reserves in, and when we don't spend them at some point, they've got to be redesignated, or it's just money that keeps building up. So we try to be more succinct and more exact with what we're spending
Right,
on.
but
on the maintenance side, yes, sir, we could do that.
Yeah, because I don't think, the things that Francis is talking about, I don't think they're $2 or $3 million projects. I don't know that we want to proceed on our own with a $2 or $3 million project. But if we come up with things moderate size, like this camera system, I think is a good example, $40,000. If we had a line item that we could associate that with, to cover and proceed and authorize it and take care of it without having to go to the city council.
Understood. In this case, and I'm just going to use that as an example because it's one everybody's familiar with, that was a totally unanticipated, that's not a maintenance, that's an enhancement and an upgrade to that system, because it was not foreseen by the original designers that that's how we would communicate with these camera systems downtown. And it was kind of a rush item because we thought the RNC was coming downtown. So now the onus is not as immediate, but we still have the interference issues and we still need to get it fixed. And I think you heard from, could have been Mark, or I may not have heard it in your group, but from the police chief, there are other further enhancements downtown we want to make. Those will be packaged as a capital project. They're not just maintaining the existing system, it's enhancement to it. It's added capabilities to it. So it's more like camera system phase 2. That would need to be added at the beginning of the year as part of the capital budget. But that's only as the police department can identify it for us.
Well, do we have to be specific on identifying it? We could historically say there was 100,000 a year of expenditures we ended up making for police and safety enhancements. So we go forward to this year and say, we're anticipating that we're going to have $100,000 this upcoming year. We don't know what's going to come up through the year, but we're, based on prior history, we're estimating $100,000 of safety enhancements.
If you can, at some comfort level, get an idea that you know that that's going to happen, because in this case, it totally wasn't. This was totally unanticipated. Even though it was only 40 grand, it was totally unanticipated that we need this. The cameras have been installed, I think, for at least 2 years, and it hadn't come up as an issue, but it just now has. So I get it to a point, but my question to Ashley would be, what if we do that and then we come at the end of the year and we didn't spend, let's say we add another $100,000 under repair and maintenance and we don't spend it, or we identify a capital project like you said, because if you're talking about enhancement to a system, that's not maintenance. That would be a capital outlay project. But let's say we come up with, hey, we think maybe the police department needs another 200 grand this year to implement this as unyet identified but necessary CAPE supporting camera. What happens at the end of the year if we don't spend that money?
So if we set money aside and don't spend it, it goes back into reserves. And at the end of every fiscal year, the CRA agencies, each district has to appropriate all of the fund balance to projects. Any balance that is not appropriated to a project must be returned to the taxing authorities. So, to the question about setting money aside each year, like setting aside $100,000 for, additional security, we can pursue that path. But then we'd have $100,000 every year that's programmed for something that may or may not happen. And so it would kind of limit the ability to plan for other projects. And then when we get to the end of the year and we return that $100,000 to the fund balance, then we kind of have to work with it to figure out, which projects to reallocate that to. And whatever project reallocate something to at the end of the fiscal year, we're bound to that with the state statutes about allocating project dollars. We're committing to that as, you know, this is what we're going to set aside for this particular project. And the only way we uncommit those funds is say that we have a change in the project scope, or we were choosing not to move forward with that project. Or we have to let that fund, those funds sit aside for a year, and then we may rebudget them for something else.
I'm not sure. Is that a bad situation?
I think it might, you know, it's a path we can talk about. It might inhibit your ability to do planning on a larger scale. If you're reserving kind of contingency dollars in every budget, you know, it's less funds that you can program for a specific project that's in the plan and on your agenda for the future years.
Okay, I'm not sure
Yeah.
I'm quite following that. You know, if we had just say we had $100,000 account and we had to return the whole thing, is that $100,000 really going to limit us in the future? That's a relatively small amount.
In 1 year, you know, I don't think it would limit you, but if you wanted to set those funds aside every year, then you're talking about $500,000 over 5 years, $1 million over 10 years. And that's when it kind of affects your project planning.
Okay, now I would respond by saying, well, if we had done the 100,000 and we come to the next year and we hadn't spent anything, the next year, maybe we don't budget anything. Or maybe a reduced amount, so we don't build it up to 500,000. We keep it at reasonable levels.
So I guess I'd want to understand a little bit more. The $100,000 you want to keep aside, is that like a contingency, or is that for?
No, it's to cover a situation that we've faced over the last couple of years where relatively small projects come up that we hadn't known about at the beginning of the year. We want to approve them, but we don't have it in the budget or a line item in the budget, so it has to go through the city council process. If we anticipate that we're going to have these things and we come up with an estimate of what we might be expected to have on an ongoing year-by-year basis, and so we budget for that, and chances, well, I guess based on past experience, we might find that they continue to, we had 4 or 5 items that eat up the 100,000.
So if I'm understanding, it's the question of like passing the appropriation through to the city council. But if it was just the CRA that was approving it, your current method of doing a resolution and a budget amendment to go forward and do that project or that repair, that is sufficient. Am I understanding?
No, but we've had to go to the city council for that. What I'm trying to explore here is whether by coming up with a line item of an anticipated expected amount within that category, whether then we can authorize it and not have to amend our budget because we have a line item for it, and it doesn't have to go back to city council.
Because technically it had already gone to city council when the initial budget was approved.
Right.
So it's not that you're not getting around going to city council. You're just going for them at the beginning of the year versus mid-year for something unanticipated.
Right, so we don't have to go back on a project specific basis for something that we want to do.
Right. No, I understand.
Well, you guys can what if this stuff to death,
No,
and you don't need to do it in the middle of a meeting. And let me go ahead and encourage you guys now. You don't have to wait to these meetings to reach out to Bill or to Ashley or to Chris or even to the city manager. You guys can meet with these guys anytime you want and go through these things. Just like I told Gary last meeting we had, because he had several spreadsheets that he wanted to go through. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking to bring somebody else in, is so you guys can feel comfortable reaching out to somebody specifically about CRA issues and budget issues. And I agree with everything you're saying. These are all problems, and these are all things that need to be addressed. Jeff, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was not talking about any particular project. I was looking for a process that we might follow so that we get around some of Francis's concerns.
Well, I had this conversation with our consultants late last week, and so we're going to plan kind of a hybrid between the city's training session they want to send us through and what they want to send us through. And we'll talk about that after we deal with the downtown parking. But that should help a lot of this stuff, or if nothing else, give us some foundation to go from. And then after that, once again, you guys can always reach out to these guys individually. Jeff, did you have any other questions?
No.
Did we have any other questions about item number B? All right, let's do the parking because that's one of the things that we're supposed to finalize today. Mr. Mann. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
I got too much going on in front of me. By the absence of any specific emails or notations to my part, I have received no comments, positive or negative. I've spoken with several of the business people I had contacted with, and I'm not trying to call out names, but one of them was the big food service deliverer, Cisco. They happened to be downtown. I saw them delivering the other day right before I had this conversation. They actually deal with a lot of the different businesses. And what's the gentleman's name that does? Can't think of his name. Anyway, one of the managers of multiple bars downtown. They've reached out to Cisco. He said he hadn't gotten any comment back from him one way or the other. So the information has gone out there. The only people I hadn't contacted with, one of them was Lynch's, and that's Jim and Taylor. That's who I gave to Keith Doherty, one of our council people. He's the manager of Lynch's. But Lynch's is closed, so I'm not sure if we're going to get their feedback anytime soon. But I feel from the people we've talked to, we've given, all of them used roughly the same or group of several delivery services. I think we've gotten sufficient outreach to these people, but they've just chosen not to comment. So we've got I think a couple of comments so far. But that being said, if you want it to go forward to council, you just need to let me know how to do it and we'll prepare it.
Officer Evans, anything from your side?
Well,
No,
I
I think as far as the non-response that Bill was getting, I think it's pretty much a non-issue because just moving them from the First Street side over to the different avenues, I really don't think, other than it's going to be a little bit of a paradigm shift, is to make sure they maybe a little bit extra time. They got to hand truck it over. They need to get used to locking their trucks. Don't leave all those beer trucks unlocked around the corner. Other than that, I think that I think it's going to be a non-issue.
Okay. Bill, so how do we make our wishes known to the city council as an official request from the CRA board? You're muted. You're muted.
I think I would have learned by now. I'll prepare the memo to get it and I'll discuss with the city manager and we'll get it in front of the city council as a recommendation coming from the CRA to amend Chapter 28 to enforce or to implement downtown delivery parking regulations. And that'll go through that hearing process at city council.
All right, well, we will do I guess we're doing a poll vote to find out where the group is as a whole on this recommendation. Jeff, this is yours. Do you have any comments before we bring this to a vote?
No, I've observed a lot of trucks. There are a lot of trucks that comply with the ordinance right now, including down in the 2nd Avenue, 2nd Street parking lot. They were out there for an hour or so on Saturday delivering. So I'm obviously in favor.
Okay, Gary?
I have no real comments. I think everything has been said and I support this resolution.
Francis?
Well, I recently saw a lot of the issues Jeff was mentioning in action over the past week, including an ambulance going by. And after watching that with all the bikers one hat and whatnot, I fully support this and approve it as well.
Sam?
Yes, I know Mr. Mann mentioned Lynch's is closed, but then I noticed that Lynch's is sort of landlocked and their deliveries will be very difficult there. Do you think we will get some pushback on that later, or whatever we decide will be enforced?
Well, I can tell you that for at least actually he's termed out. So at least through November, Councilman Doherty, who is also the general manager of Lynch's, will see this from the city council side. And of all the properties with a potential delivery issue, it would probably be Lynch's. I still feel that the half alley that's stubbed out just to the north of Lynch's would be adequate for somebody to just drive by back in. They may do that now, I don't know. But if we have that kind of comment, that would be at council's direction that we tailor the ordinance and say, make an exception for that one block area. The only other people in that strip are the new restaurant that doesn't have a tenant yet. Francis, right in front of your, no, it's not in front of your building, it's in front of the gallery. I'm sorry, wrong block. But anyway, they have a parking lot between the gallery and them that's totally adequate to pull in for deliveries or not. That is one of the avenues that we're restricting traffic on because it feeds from the light at 4th Avenue, and that's a tighter alley. But between those properties, Lynch's may be one that would have an issue with just the deliveries being around the corner in front of V Pizza. That's where it would be. It would come from V Pizza. So they'd have to walk past the front of V Pizza to get to Lynch's. It's still less than a block because we're not restricting that alley in front of V Pizza between V and Mango's across the street. That's one of the available avenues for delivery. So, but we may get a comment from them, from Mr. Doherty. I don't know. I have no idea. We have reached out to him. Jim, were you able to talk with Mr. Doherty yet?
You're muted.
I placed a call to him, waiting for a call back.
Okay.
Well, we're going to go, we'll make this recommendation to the, Jeff?
Yeah, just anecdotally, I want to observe that, you know, as I said, I drive around a lot observing what's happening with the trucks. And twice within the last month, I've seen a delivery truck on 5th Avenue servicing V's Pizza walking around in front. As Bill noted, to go to Lynch's is an additional 20, 30 feet. So I don't believe it should be an insurmountable obstacle for Lynch's.
Well, we're going to make the recommendation to the city council. What we have in front of us, as that was proposed, I do not support it. I have told you guys that when we first talked about this, I thought this is premature, especially with 2 hotels under construction. And this is before all the COVID stuff started happening. But once again, we have 4 votes that want to move forward with this. So, Bill, if we would do whatever it is we need to do, either through a memo or what have you, to officially let the city council know that this is our proposal and for them to make those changes?
Yes, sir, I will do that. And I will tell you there are 2 items in discussing with the city attorney that you have not seen in the draft regulation. You have the intent, you have the area covered. We need to add a section in there about what the fines would be. And both the police and the city, well, I think it was the police primarily, felt it was appropriate for a $100 citation. The other thing we need to provide in the section of Chapter 28 is who the—
Bill, slow down. Start again and slower.
Okay, there were 2 things that will need to be added to the regulations that you've seen. The first is the fine, which is recommended by the police department that we issue a $100 fine. The second is the method of enforcement, and they are proposing that it go through the special magistrate as opposed to going through, forgive my general phraseology, but just through traffic court downtown. They'd rather have the violations be heard out here at the beach. But those 2 sections are kind of perfunctory. So if it goes to council as an ordinance, it will have the fine section and the enforcement section added.
So you're saying that you want for us to make that determination as it goes to the city council, or you want to leave that for them to make that determination?
I'm asking if you would like us to draft the ordinance and you would like to see it before we send it to council, or if you're comfortable having the city council deal with what the fine and enforcement language are within that section.
Jeff?
I'm comfortable with the city council taking that on.
I second that.
Okay. Chris, were you going to add something there?
Hi, Chair. I was just going to add what Bill basically said was I spoke to Sergeant Sharp and Commander Evans and Bill and Mike, and we determined that the best thing for us to do is we need to include the fines, enforcement, and hearing sections in the proposed ordinance. And Bill already told you the details that our police department will do the active enforcement. They will issue a local citation rather than utilize the uniform traffic citation, which you would normally see if someone parks in a handicap spot or a speeding violation. Those citations cite to a Florida statute and they get brought before a Florida traffic court hearing officer. My recommendation, and I believe the police department agrees, is that our police officers will use their own local citation form that they use. That fine will be for $100 per violation. The fine can be paid at the police department. And if a violator chooses to dispute that citation, they'll go through our magistrate hearing process, as opposed to going downtown through a traffic court. Because we wouldn't want a traffic court hearing officer downtown to be trying to interpret our code and our ordinances. So we're going to keep it inside our own magistrate hearing procedure for those people that don't want to just pay the fine. But that's all. Thank you, Chairman.
Francis?
Do we need to include the warnings? Because we were talking originally that they were going to do some warnings before they started issuing citations. Are we going to include that in any language that, that, or is that just going to be an understanding that first time offense is not instantly a ticket?
Mark?
Yeah, I think with, and I've already talked with Sergeant Sharp, I think probably what we would do is we would do that in-house. I don't think that should be addressed unless I'm over speaking, Chris. I don't think that should be addressed. I think that, when we send our marching orders out to our officers as to what the intent is to get compliance, again, it's the same. I mean, officers have discretion. So I would like to leave that discretion to the officers so that way they're not backed into a corner, whether they will or will not. I think that needs to be handled on a case by case at the officer's discretion.
Chris?
And I realize that the delivery drivers are going to likely be the same drivers that those same officers see time and time again. So we talked about this earlier today, that there will be that initial education process. It won't be listed it won't be included in the ordinance, but from officer to driver, give them one or perhaps lucky two chances to comply, educate them, and then begin the strict enforcement with issuing the citation.
Okay, Mr. Mann, does that give us everything we need to hand this off to the City Council?
Yes, sir, I believe it does.
All right. Mr. Gilmore, thank you for your patience.
Oh, listen, I've enjoyed this tremendously. Just few things. One is, in talking with the members of the agency and talking with Bill first and Art and of course the others, and Bill and I talked about this first and I took it up with Art as well, is that the workshop that you had been planning on July 31st, and keep in mind, Bill opened with that statement about something as it relates to a workshop session budget and about CRA and how it operates generally, legislatively, and how the relationships with the city. We're recommending that we go ahead and plan that. What we said that we would do is that we would serve as staff to you as a CRA and to Bill to help organize it, plan it, pull it together, because Bill's extremely busy. And that's what we discussed doing. And that's what we're recommending to move on and get something scheduled as soon as is convenient for Bill and everyone else can come together. What we will do is to draft for consideration an agenda on how it would work and who would be involved to address all the issues that we've heard expressed today, but also on the one-on-ones that we've had with each of you as well. And so by your leave, Mr. Chairman, other members, and again, you've heard Bill talk about it lots. I don't need to talk about it anymore because that's what we're talking about doing, and we're going to serve as staff to help get it done. The other thing that I would add is, aside from that point, is that we did prepare a a time and task schedule, which we gave to Bill, and we'd be glad, based on how you want to do that, we can circulate that to you via email, or Bill can do it. Bill just nodded yes, so we will get that out to you tomorrow. Okay? But we did get that done and have provided it. We'll circulate it to you via email. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we talked about this workshop that the city wants to put on and that Jim and Taylor are going to be involved with. How soon can we make that happen?
It depends on who the identified players are outside of this group that's on the screen now would participate. I don't know if it's something, Jim, and I don't know if you had anticipated reaching out to Cliff Shepherd at all, or
We had
Chris.
talked about Cliff Shepherd being a part of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
It would just be,
Go
yeah,
ahead, I'm sorry.
actually, and well, let's get an agenda and talk about it that way and get some other feedback. And if any members have feedback, we'll reach out to you individually as well.
Okay.
Do we want to put something on the calendar while we're all sitting here now, or do you want to reach out to us all through via email, make that happen?
That would be up to you, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I think I'd rather
I'm
do
always
the
one of the
latter.
people want to.
What?
I think it would be appropriate to do the latter, given that the group, Cliff Shepherd's firm, is preparing to give the presentation on the downtown plan consolidation in the week of August the 10th. And the regularly scheduled meeting would be August the 24th. So that would be the earliest that we would have a time slot to do that, because I think those two items are too big together that could end up being a 4-hour meeting. And I think both of those need to be sole purpose meetings.
They need to be separate.
My point is the earliest it could be would be the 24th. But after everybody gets the email, they may have input into what this training would involve. So until we get an idea about what the exact training is, I don't know if it may be premature to identify the date as the 24th, but I'm just telling you that's the earliest right now I could do it. If it's not August 24th, it could be sometime as a special meeting in the middle of September.
Well, we have many members here chopping at the bit about the budget. And so I think we're going to need to do this training before we start getting to that stuff. So I think pushing it off to the end of August is going to be problematic.
Well, would you rather do that first and then push Shepherd off till August, or till the end of August?
I would rather do that first, correct? Unless I'm hearing something different from the board members. I think that training meeting should be first.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Do you think that's sufficient time, Jim,
Francis?
to get?
Yes.
Okay. Then I will.
You guys nodding your head, okay?
I would like to make sure that we review the budget and get whatever we need done for the budget ASAP.
Okay.
So we have some kind of say.
And Shepherd's already under contract with us to do the plan consolidation work, so that could just be additional work under that contract. So it's not a matter of going back to council to get approval for it, because we do have a contractual relationship with them. So I will make that note.
So if Jim and Bill will get together as soon as you guys can make that happen. I mean, if we need to do it the week of August 10th, I mean, are you looking to do it actually that Monday or sometime that week?
All I had identified was the week, sir. I don't schedule the meetings going forward until the very end of the preceding meeting, because it always changes. I'm never sure what's going to come up from any one of these individual meetings. But right now, I've just got it. I've just got it identified as the 10th.
What's your question, sir, Mr. Chairman?
When can we put that on the calendar?
Well, I'd like to work on the agenda first and see what we have, but in terms of the date that week, I'll leave that up to you. It can be Monday the 10th. It can be whatever's most convenient based on your all schedule.
Does it not work for anybody Monday the 10th?
I need to check and make sure there are no other parallel city meetings, because it does seem to be a problem when we have two meetings that get pushed out to the internet live. We can only do one, and it's not a matter of we can't do it, but it's a matter of coordinating.
I have nothing scheduled that week.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I didn't hear you, Francis.
I said I have nothing scheduled in the evenings that week.
The only thing I would say is that there is a city budget workshop that day from, I guess that's roughly 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock, just for your information.
Okay. On that Monday, you said?
Yes. I guess it's 5 to 7 is when that is.
I'm trying to find it.
So that means we may have to do Tuesday.
Or Wednesday. Let me see if,
There's
Well, Jim-
also a budget where there's also a budget workshop on that day,
On what day?
on the 11th.
Is the budget workshop every day that week?
that's not, I only have access to what I've been invited to, which is my department. Mine's Monday night. So I'm not, Gary's got access to other people's information, I guess.
Yeah,
I can't
they've
tell
just
you.
got a series of meetings scheduled, and it starts this Friday, and then it's the 3rd and 4th, and then the 10th and 11th. And then I think that covers it then for them. So there's 5 workshops days.
Wednesday of that week then maybe seem like it would be the earliest.
So Wednesday the 12th.
Got it.
Does anybody have a problem with Wednesday the 12th?
No.
Looks like everybody's okay with Wednesday the 12th. Jim, can we tentatively look at that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Do we have somebody on the phone that wants to speak to us?
Yes, we
Bill?
do. Mr. Marsh, are you available?
Yes, I am here. Everybody hear me
You
all
have the
right?
floor.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, good discussion about the budget, the out years there. I think eventually there'll be a good process there on where the money's coming in and where it's going. I understand the need about projects 3 and the infrastructure work there. But going and looking at the capital improvement plan, something that's glaringly omitted is anything that relates to the vision plan. Specifically, things like Latham Park Plaza, Pier Park Plaza, garages, none of those specific type infrastructures projects are is even noted anywhere there. And probably the reason is we haven't had good vision discussions around that. And that's where I see the importance of having Cliff's group and you all having this discussion and trying to formulate the out year budgets to try to figure out where the vision is and what projects you want to put against some of his plans. But I think we should expect that he's going to have something like these retail mixed use places that we've had in the 87 plan and the 2007 plan, and some discussion around garages. So I think we should at least know going in that those are going to be discussion points that we should start thinking about where you're going to plug those into the longer term budget outlooks. And maybe it's, as Gary stated, maybe it's further than 5 years. Maybe you need something longer. But, you know, the way I'm looking at the 5-year plan, there's nothing in there that tells the residents that you're making the downtown a vibrant, resident-friendly place that's going to have more shops and restaurants. And that's something you all know that we're looking for. So again, I understand the need for the Project 3, but I think as this year's budget comes around the corner, the first question I hope you'll have for Cliff is, what can we put into the budget, the capital budget, that we can get done right away, and you plug that in right away so that the council sees that money and you don't have to go back to them, and you can start pushing a vision plan forward, which we haven't done a good job of. The other part of this is a discussion and putting in the monies for what I would call a step plan between now and when we actually achieve getting these projects like Dolphin Depot and Spring Hill Suites built. I mean, we've got all these fences, and I know Jeff mentioned beautifying the downtown, and Francis mentioned it. So what kind of money would be necessary in order to beautify this and show the new guests that are coming into Margaritaville and Weston that we are a city that is building for the future and not in a phase of demolition? So I think that could be something that could be looked at very quickly and put into the budget line item somewhere so that the residents don't have to continue to look at this downtown in a state of disrepair. So I hope that makes sense to you all. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that the Spring Hill Suites we know is on hold. There was a business meeting, a business vision meeting that was held by Mike here a week or so ago. And the comment was made, why are we not leveraging our ocean and getting like rooftop bars? Okay. And Jeff, you probably were in that meeting where the Metropolitan people said, look, can we get the Spring Hill Suites to put a rooftop bar there? And I think the response was, well, we have a height problem and this and that. And I'm thinking, is it too unreasonable now that the Spring Hill Suites is in hold to go back to them and say, hey, look, take another look at this. Is there any way that we can get a rooftop bar and not have to go through a height referendum? So, you know, again, this could be 2 years off. Nobody knows when Spring Hill Suites is going to start building, but maybe there's a way that they could revisit that and maybe help out some of the folks there in the Metropolitan that had concerns about looking down on air conditioning, and also give the residents something there that says we're a town that's on the move or progressing somewhere. So anyway, that came out in the business vision meeting, and I think it's something to maybe run back up the flagpole and see if there's anything there for Spring Hill Suites. So that's it, Art.
Thanks, Ken. Bill, you know, the first thing that pops into my head after listening to Ken is, why didn't anybody tell us about that meeting?
Actually, can you hear me? Actually, it was not one meeting. It's been a series of 8 meetings, and it was specifically just to outreach to different neighborhoods, not necessarily city council or CRA. And it was not just focused on the downtown area.
And this is Mike. They were not targeted in any particular area of the city. It just so happened that we had a few business entities from the downtown that wanted to participate in that particular meeting, including Sunny Bika. But it was not something where it was targeted specifically for the downtown or the CRA.
How you guys are thinking now?
Francis.
No, I was just saying that I was told it was not related because I actually was going to go as well. But I was told that it was not for downtown businesses and therefore wasn't going to be the downtown area. That's why I wouldn't think we would get it.
Okay, that concludes our agenda. Anything for the good of the order? Right now, we have our next meeting being the 12th. I'm taking that 5 o'clock. If there's something that changes with that, we'll hear from either Gilmore or Mann. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They're both nodding your head. Anything else? All right, that all being said, we adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.